We're gonna do two things in this video. Thing one, I'm gonna take the subwoofer box for the cheap subwoofers that I started in the last video, and I'm gonna carpet and vinyl that box. And thing number two is we're gonna put these cheap subs to the test, see how they sound and see how much bass they can make. Why? Because I like cheap subs and I cannot lie. I've been experimenting with vinyl. Vinyl's really hard to work with. My first attempt was a complete failure. I uploaded my second attempt a few weeks ago and it was a little better, but really not that good. Let's see if my skills have improved. Here's a tip. Grab some black spray paint and paint any place where you might have a seam. This will help camouflage small mistakes. Now, historically, I've used spray adhesive out of a spray can, but I've since switched to this stuff here. I'm applying it with a cheap Harbor Freight spray gun. I want to point out that this thing needs 6 CFM at 40 PSI. My 6-gallon pancake style compressor is rated for 2.6 CFM at 90 PSI, and it can't keep up. So keep that in mind if you want to try out this type of adhesive. You're going to need something a little bit nicer than your basic entry-level air compressor. After spraying both the carpet and the enclosure, you let the glue dry for 5 or so minutes, and then you just adhere the carpet to the enclosure. The instructions say you've got to really press down to get it to grab, and I've found that one of the best ways to do that is just to let the weight of the box do the work. Now it's on to one of the tricky parts. I've got to wrap the carpet over the outer trim piece and jam that carpet into that rabbited groove underneath that piece. The roundover that I cut earlier makes it a lot easier to wrap it around that piece. This knife right here has a pry tool at the end of it, and it works great for this type of thing. After you get finished jamming some carpet in, you just turn the knife around and cut the carpet. Just make sure that you retract the blade when you're using the pry tool in so you don't cut yourself. The next part is also tricky to get right. This is the seam on the back. After spraying both surfaces, you just fold the carpet over so that the two ends overlap. Then you want to grab a straight edge and cut through both pieces of carpet at the same time. With a little practice, you'll get a nearly invisible seam. And I have found that this jet black carpet seems to be really forgiving. It's much easier to hide your seams with this than with gray carpet. I'll make sure to give you a link to the carpet plus everything else I use in this video down in the video description. You can see here that earlier I cut a rabbet into the sides. That's an idea that I stole from Car Audio Fabrication. This makes it a lot easier to carpet the sides. You fold the carpet over, jam it into those grooves, and then you cut away the extra. Here is another tip for you. Get a really good pair of scissors, something designed to cut carpet and other thick fabrics. A good pair of scissors or shears is going to make it really easy to trim out these dog ears in the corners. And of course, you finish up the sides by taking another piece of carpet, spraying on some adhesive, waiting a few minutes, sticking it into position, and using the groove to trim that piece. Okay, this next part is the part that I am the most worried about. Let's see about that vinyl. I decided to go with a white vinyl. White's kind of tricky. It does show stains, so you've got to be really careful when working with it, but it's going to give us a really nice contrast. I've got the jet black carpet on the rest of the box. The woofer cones are black with a little light gray logo in the center, and then I'll have this white vinyl on the face of the enclosure. And the procedure is basically the same. Spray the baffle, spray the backside of the vinyl, stick it in place, and tuck that vinyl underneath that trim piece. And this part is much trickier than it looks. You've really got to jam that vinyl all the way into the groove, but don't push too hard so that you don't poke a hole in the vinyl. Also be careful that you don't let the material bunch up. You can see a little gash right here. The material had bunched up and I had to make a relief cut in order to get the vinyl to lay flat. Fortunately, that little gap is going to be covered up by the sub. And of course, I could not make these videos without the support of my patrons. Patrons get access to plans and behind the scenes content. Plus, $10 patrons get their name right down here at the bottom of the screen. And $25 patrons like Bo, David T, Bam Bam, Dylan, Fargo, JD America, and Bava, they all get a shout out in the video. Hit the link in the description to join us on Patreon. The vinyl is finished and I am totally stoked. It's not quite perfect, but it turned out much better than any of my previous attempts. Y'all, practice makes perfect. If you want to get good at doing something like this, you just have to keep trying it over and over again. Now we need to wire everything up. I want you to notice something in this shot right here. I'm using an old rag to protect the vinyl while I wire up the subwoofer. These subs are dual 4 ohm. I'm wiring everything parallel, so I'll get a 1 ohm nominal load at the amplifier. For the amp, I'm going to be using this NVX XAD11 that I had laying around. Hey, make sure that you pre-drill pilot holes before you screw down the drivers. I did that off camera. This next step is very important if you're serious about building subwoofer boxes. I'm using a device called a DATS to verify the tuning frequency. If you don't test and verify the tuning frequency, you don't know if you built the box right. We get an FB of 31.96, which is really close to the 32 that I was aiming for. Hey, check this out. I want you to notice this. There's very little impedance rise in this plot. That's not something I've ever seen before, and I'm not sure what to make of it. All right, so I've got it installed in the truck. It's just putting a box in the back. It's not that big a deal. It's not on my back seat. I took my back seat out months ago. At the moment, I've got the JP23 installed, which is too much amplifier for these two subwoofers. Yeah, I know, I can just turn the gain down. But there's two reasons why I want to go ahead and swap this thing out. Reason number one is I'm gonna be tempted to crank that bass knob up and blow these things. I don't like destroying equipment, so I'm gonna try to avoid that. And the second reason is I want to give you a little bit more realistic picture of what something like this might sound like in your own vehicle. According to the spec sheet, these things are rated for 350 watts RMS. And so I want an amplifier that will pair better with two of these things. And with a little editing magic, the amp is installed. I don't know how it managed to get so dusty. Okay, let's take some SPL measurements. Let's start at 30 Hertz. Now this meter will not read anything less than 120 dB. And at 30 Hertz, we never triggered the meter, so not terribly loud at those low frequencies. Then things get interesting as we kick the frequency up a little bit. Keep in mind that you can get a pair of these subs plus this amp for about $225 if you use the discount code down in the video description. So this is solid performance for a budget setup. Plus, this thing is tuned pretty low. If you were to bump up that tuning frequency to 36 or 40 Hertz, you could in theory squeeze out a few more dB. That would be easy to do. You just need to cut the port a little shorter. All right, so how does it sound? Like I said before, I like cheap subs and I cannot lie. I've been driving around for a couple of weeks now, and I'm happy with the result. I think this setup punches above its weight. I probably should have tuned it closer to 36 Hertz. Something like this would be perfect for a teenager looking to get into car audio without breaking the bank. Just keep in mind that this is inexpensive entry-level gear. Well, how does it look? I think it's the best looking enclosure I've ever built, but I think I can do better. In fact, I've already started designing the next one. To learn how to use this software to design your own enclosure, click right here. To learn how to break down your MDF so your box is easy to build, click right here. If you want to see my next box build, click right here and subscribe to the channel. I am Justin, the DIY audio guy, and I will see you on the next adventure.